My name is Hannah Whitaker, and I've been watching digital shadows move through networks for 12 years. Most people think cybersecurity is about building walls, but they're wrong. It's about understanding the spaces between walls, the gaps where light doesn't reach, the places where predators hide. The ghost IP first appeared at 2:58 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was nursing my third cup of coffee in the empty seventh floor of Orion Systems. Our Chicago office bathed in the sterile glow of emergency lighting. The building's heating system had given up hours ago, and my breath formed small clouds as I typed. Most nights, I preferred the solitude. No interruptions, no meetings, no one asking me to explain why certain security protocols couldn't be streamlined for efficiency. The monitor displayed our network traffic in real time, a constellation of data points flowing like digital blood through our infrastructure. I'd been tracking an anomaly for 3 weeks. Nothing dramatic, just a pattern that didn't belong. Network intrusions rarely announce themselves with sirens and flashing lights. They whisper. At 2:58:13 a.m., the whisper became a scream. A connection request from 198.51.100. 247 appeared in the logs. Not unusual by itself, but this IP had been dormant for months. What made my stomach clench was the authentication sequence that followed. The system recognized this IP as having administrative privileges, but there was no record of those privileges being granted. I pulled up the authentication logs, cross-referencing the IP against our database of authorized connections. Nothing. The IP wasn't in our whitelist, wasn't in our vendor database, wasn't in any database I could access. Yet somehow, it had walked through our security like it owned the place. I started digging deeper, following the digital breadcrumbs through our network architecture. The connection originated from outside our corporate firewall, passed through 3 proxy servers, and landed directly in our most sensitive system, the module that handled government contract data. Stratos X. The name alone made me nauseous. 3 months ago, our IT director, Richard Mallory, had pushed through the implementation of this third-party security module over my explicit objections. The vendor, Meridian Solutions, had promised enhanced encryption and streamlined access controls. What they delivered was a black box that none of us fully understood. My supervisor, Ethan Price, had been the one championing the deployment. "Hannah, you're overthinking this," he'd said during one of our heated discussions. "Meridian has contracts with Fortune 500 companies. They know what they're doing." But I'd spent enough time in the trenches to know that reputation meant nothing when code was concerned. You trusted what you could verify, and Stratus X was largely unverifiable. Now, at 3:47 a.m., I was staring at proof of why my paranoia had been justified. The ghost IP had accessed our database 17 times in the past hour. Each access was logged, time-stamped, and meticulously recorded. But here's what made my blood run cold. The system was treating these intrusions as legitimate administrative tasks. I pulled up the Stratus X source code, the portions that Meridian had made available for our review. Most of it was standard authentication and encryption algorithms. Nothing revolutionary, but nothing alarming either. But buried in the access control module, I found something that made my coffee taste like ash. A comment in the code read, "Remove later, temp access for debugging." Below it, a function that granted backdoor access to any IP address matching a specific pattern. The pattern was encrypted, but the encryption was laughably weak. A simple XOR cipher that any first-year computer science student could break. I decrypted it in less than 5 minutes. The pattern matched the ghost IP exactly. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a bug. This was intentional. I spent the next 4 hours documenting everything. Screenshots of the network logs, copies of the source code, a detailed timeline of the intrusions. I cross-referenced the ghost IP against public databases and found it registered to a server farm in Eastern Europe, the kind of place where questions weren't asked as long as payments were made in cryptocurrency. By 8 a.m., I had a 30-page report that read like a technical thriller. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and terrifying. Someone had deliberately installed a backdoor in our most sensitive system, and they'd been using it to access classified government data. The morning shift began filtering into the office around 8:30. I watched my colleagues settle into their cubicles, grabbing coffee and checking emails, completely unaware that our entire network had been compromised. Part of me wanted to stand up and announce what I'd discovered, to watch their faces as they realized the magnitude of the breach. Instead, I sent an email to Ethan. Priority: critical. Need to discuss network intrusion discovered overnight. Available for immediate meeting. His response came back in 12 minutes. Busy with budget reviews. Can it wait until this afternoon? I stared at his reply, feeling a familiar frustration building in my chest. This was exactly the kind of attitude that had led to major security breaches at other companies. The "it can wait" mentality that treated cybersecurity as an afterthought rather than a foundation. I walked to Ethan's office, my printed report tucked under my arm. He was hunched over his laptop, frantically clicking through spreadsheets. His desk was a monument to corporate chaos: empty energy drink cans, printed emails, and a stress ball that had been squeezed into an unrecognizable shape. "Ethan, we need to talk. Now." He looked up, annoyed. "Hannah, I told you I'm swamped. The quarterly numbers are due to Mallory by noon, and I'm still trying to figure out why our licensing costs are 15% over budget." "Forget the budget. Our network has been compromised. Someone installed a backdoor in Stratus X, and they've been accessing classified data for weeks." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" I placed the report on his desk, opened to the page showing the Ghost IP's access logs. I found an unauthorized connection point that's been active since the Stratus X deployment. The access is intentional, coded directly into the module. We're talking about a deliberate security breach. Ethan picked up the report, skimming through the first few pages. His expression shifted from concern to something else, something I couldn't quite identify. "Hannah, this is a lot to process. Are you sure about this? I mean, completely sure. I've triple-checked everything. The evidence is solid." He set the report down and leaned back in his chair. "Okay, but let's think about this rationally. Meridian Solutions is a reputable company. They're not in the business of installing backdoors in client systems. Isn't it possible that this is just a configuration error? Maybe something we missed during the implementation?" I stared at him, wondering if he was genuinely trying to rationalize away the evidence or if he was stalling for time. "Ethan, I've been doing this for 12 years. I know the difference between a configuration error and a deliberate backdoor. This isn't a mistake." "But you're talking about a massive security breach involving a government contractor. The implications are enormous. We need to be absolutely certain before we start making accusations." "I'm not making accusations. I'm reporting facts. And the fact is that our network has been compromised. We need to shut down the Stratus X module immediately and contact our government clients to inform them of the breach." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Hannah, I appreciate your diligence, but we can't just shut down a critical system based on speculation. The Stratus X module is handling 3 major government contracts. If we take it offline without solid proof of a threat, we could be looking at contract violations, penalties, maybe even lawsuits. The proof is in the report. 30 pages of documentation showing exactly how the backdoor works and how it's been exploited. Documentation that you've prepared. Look, I'm not questioning your technical skills, but this is the kind of thing that needs to be verified by an independent third party. We can't just take your word for it." The words hit me like a physical blow. After 12 years of service, after countless nights spent protecting this company's digital assets, he was questioning my credibility. "You want verification? Fine, let's bring in an external auditor. But in the meantime, we need to at least monitor the Stratus X module more closely, and we need to inform Mallory immediately." Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay, that's reasonable. I'll talk to Mallory about bringing in an external auditor. But let's keep this between us for now. No need to panic the entire IT department over something that might turn out to be a false alarm." I left his office with a growing sense of unease. Something about Ethan's reaction felt wrong. He'd been too quick to dismiss the evidence, too eager to find alternative explanations. In 12 years of working together, I'd never seen him so reluctant to take a security threat seriously. That afternoon, I didn't hear from either Ethan or Mallory. I spent the day monitoring the Stratus X module, watching as the ghost IP continued its unauthorized access. Each intrusion was logged, each data extraction documented. The pattern was becoming clearer. Whoever was behind this wasn't just randomly accessing our systems, they were targeting specific files, specific contracts, specific pieces of classified information. At 5:30 p.m., I decided to escalate directly to Mallory. I sent him an email with the subject line, "Critical security breach, immediate action required," and attached my full report. His response came back in 45 seconds. Reviewed your report. The issues you've identified do not constitute a security breach. The Stratus X module is functioning as designed. Please discontinue this line of investigation. I read the email 3 times, certain I'd misunderstood something. How could he have reviewed a 30-page technical report in 45 seconds? How could he dismiss documented evidence of a backdoor as functioning as designed? I picked up my phone and dialed Mallory's extension. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Ethan's extension. Same result. A cold realization began to settle in my stomach. This wasn't incompetence or corporate bureaucracy. This was deliberate suppression. I stayed late that night, copying every piece of evidence to multiple external drives. I documented every intrusion, every access, every piece of data that had been compromised. If they wanted to bury this, they'd have to bury me with it. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find a meeting request in my inbox. Team Sync, Conference Room B, 9:00 a.m., mandatory attendance. I walked into the conference room to find Ethan and Mallory already seated. The atmosphere was funeral quiet, and both men avoided eye contact as I took my seat. "Hannah," Mallory began, his voice measured and professional. "We need to discuss your recent activities. If you're referring to my discovery of the security breach, then yes, we definitely need to discuss it. We're referring to your unauthorized investigation of our security systems and your attempts to undermine confidence in our vendor relationships." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. I did my job. I identified a security threat and reported it through proper channels. You conducted an unauthorized penetration test of our systems without approval. You accessed code repositories that are outside your defined responsibilities. And you've made unfounded accusations against a vendor partner. Everything I did was within my scope as senior security architect, and the accusations aren't unfounded, they're documented. Ethan leaned forward, his expression almost sympathetic. "Hannah, we understand that you believe you found something concerning. But your investigation has caused significant problems. Meridian Solutions has been made aware of your allegations, and they're threatening to terminate their contract with us. We're looking at potential lawsuits, contract violations, and damage to our reputation." Good. If they're running from scrutiny, that should tell you everything you need to know about their intentions. Mallory's facade of professionalism cracked slightly. "Hannah, you're not thinking clearly. You've become obsessed with finding problems where none exist. Your paranoia is affecting your judgment and your ability to work effectively with the team." My paranoia? I documented 17 unauthorized intrusions in a single night. I found a backdoor coded directly into our security system. This isn't paranoia. It's reality. It's speculation based on incomplete information and flawed analysis. We've had our own experts review your findings, and they've determined that the activities you've documented are consistent with normal system maintenance and automated security updates. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare where words had lost all meaning. What experts? When was this review conducted? Why wasn't I included? The review was conducted by qualified personnel with appropriate security clearances. The details are confidential, but the conclusion is clear. There is no security breach. Then show me the review. Show me the evidence that contradicts my findings. Mallory shook his head. That's not how this works. Hannah, You don't get to demand access to information that's above your clearance level. You've been given a direct order to discontinue your investigation, and you've chosen to ignore that order. I've been given an order to ignore a security breach that threatens national security. That's not an order I can follow. The room fell silent. Ethan and Mallory exchanged glances, and I could see the decision being made without words. Hannah, Mallory said slowly, effective immediately. You're being placed on administrative leave pending a full review of your recent actions. You'll need to surrender your access credentials and any company property in your possession. You're firing me for doing my job? We're suspending you for failing to follow direct orders and for engaging in activities that have damaged our business relationships. The final determination will be made after the review process is complete. I stood up, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over me. I need to pack my things. Security will escort you to your desk. You'll have 10 minutes to collect personal items. All company property, including any documents or data related to your investigation, will remain with the company. As I walked to my desk accompanied by 2 security guards, I felt the eyes of my colleagues following me. Some looked confused, others sympathetic, but most just looked away. In the corporate world, being escorted by security was a kind of social death, a visible symbol that you'd crossed a line from which there was no return. I packed my personal items methodically, a few family photos, a coffee mug my daughter had given me for my birthday, a small succulent that had somehow survived 3 years of fluorescent lighting. The security guards watched my every movement, making sure I didn't slip any company documents into my bag. As I walked toward the elevator, I caught sight of the large banner hanging in the lobby. Innovate fearlessly, Orion Systems. I almost laughed. Almost. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the evidence I'd gathered. External drives full of network logs, printed reports, screenshots of the backdoor code. I'd spent 2 days documenting the most significant security breach I'd ever encountered. And I'd been fired for my efforts. I opened a bottle of wine and tried to make sense of what had happened. The reaction from Ethan and Mallory had been so extreme, so defensive, that it couldn't be explained by simple corporate incompetence. They weren't just ignoring the security breach, they were actively suppressing it, which meant they knew about it. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. If they wanted to play hardball, I could play hardball. I began drafting an email to the FBI's Cybercrime Division, attaching every piece of evidence I'd collected. If Orion Systems wouldn't protect their government clients, maybe the government would protect itself. But before I could send the email, my phone rang. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. Hannah Whitaker? Speaking. This is Agent Morrison with the FBI Cybercrime Division. I understand you've uncovered some concerning information about your former employer. My heart skipped a beat. How did you? We've been monitoring unusual network activity from several government contractors. Your name came up in our investigation. We'd like to speak with you about what you've discovered. I was just about to contact you. We know. We've been watching this situation develop. Can you meet with us tomorrow morning? We have some questions about the security breach you documented. I looked at my laptop screen, the unsent email still open. How much do you know? More than you might think. But we need your expertise to fill in the gaps. Are you available at 9 a.m.? Yes. Someone will be in touch with location details. And Hannah? Don't discuss this conversation with anyone. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. The FBI was already investigating Orion Systems. My discovery of the backdoor hadn't been the beginning of the story. It had been the missing piece of a larger puzzle. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing my evidence, preparing for questions I couldn't anticipate. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than a simple security breach. It was bigger than corporate incompetence or vendor negligence. At 2 a.m., I was still awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering how many other companies had been compromised. How many other security professionals had been silenced or discredited for asking the right questions. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Federal Plaza, Suite 1247, 9 a.m. Come alone. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my mind kept racing. In 12 hours, I would walk into a federal building and tell my story to people who had the power to act on it. For the first time in days, I felt something approaching hope, but I also felt something else, a growing certainty that what I'd discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The next morning, I arrived at the Federal Plaza 15 minutes early. The security process was extensive: metal detectors, X-ray machines, background checks. When I finally reached Suite 1247, I was escorted into a conference room where 3 people were waiting. Agent Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of intense focus that comes from years of chasing digital ghosts. He was accompanied by 2 other agents whose names I didn't catch and a woman who introduced herself as Rebecca Langley. "Ms. Whitaker," Agent Morrison began, "thank you for coming in. We understand you've been through a difficult few days." That's one way to put it. "Before we begin, I want you to know that everything you tell us will be handled with the utmost confidentiality. We're not here to compromise your safety or your career prospects. We're here because we believe you've uncovered something that threatens national security." Rebecca Langley leaned forward. "Hannah, I should mention that I'm on the board of directors at Orion Systems. What you're about to tell us could have significant implications for the company." My blood ran cold. "You're on the board? Then you know about the cover-up." "I know about the allegations. I know about your termination. And I know that Richard Mallory and Ethan Price have been making decisions without board oversight. That's why I'm here." Agent Morrison opened a file folder and placed several photographs on the table. "These are images of server farms in Eastern Europe, specifically the facility hosting the IP address you identified as the source of the intrusions. We've been monitoring this facility for 6 months as part of a broader investigation into cyber espionage." I stared at the photographs, recognizing the building configurations that matched the digital fingerprints I'd traced. "You've been tracking them?" "We've been tracking their activities across multiple targets: defense contractors, government agencies, financial institutions. The pattern is always the same. They gain access through compromised third-party security modules, extract sensitive data, and disappear before they can be detected. Stratos X isn't the only compromised module. It's one of dozens. The operation is sophisticated, well-funded, and extremely patient. They'll spend months or even years establishing their access before they begin extraction." Rebecca Langley pulled out her phone and showed me a series of emails. "These are communications between Richard Mallory and Meridian Solutions. The board wasn't aware of these discussions, but they reveal a pattern of unusual influence over our security decisions." I read through the emails, my anger building with each exchange. Mallory hadn't just approved the Stratos X deployment, he'd pushed for it, overriding security protocols and bypassing normal vendor evaluation processes. "He knew," I said quietly. "He knew exactly what he was doing." Agent Morrison nodded. "We believe both Mallory and Price were compromised. Whether through bribery, blackmail, or ideological motivation, we're still determining, but their actions have given foreign actors access to classified information from multiple government contracts." "What about the other employees? Are they at risk?" "We don't believe the compromise extends beyond the senior leadership. Most of your colleagues are victims, not perpetrators, but the damage has been significant." Rebecca Langley leaned back in her chair. "Hannah, I need you to understand something. When you discovered that back door, you didn't just identify a security breach, you uncovered a critical component of an ongoing espionage operation. The information you've provided has allowed us to trace the network of compromised systems and identify the full scope of the infiltration. The question now," Agent Morrison added, "is whether you're willing to help us complete the investigation. We need your technical expertise to document the full extent of the breach and to help us understand how the system was compromised." I looked around the room at their expectant faces. 3 days ago, I'd been a security architect doing my job. Now I was being asked to help dismantle an international espionage ring. "What do you need me to do?" "First, We need a comprehensive technical analysis of the Stratus X module and any other systems that might have been compromised. Second, we need you to help us understand the timeline of the infiltration. When it began, how it progressed, what information was accessed. And third, Rebecca Langley added, we need you to be prepared to testify about what you discovered and how the company responded to your findings. The word testify sent a chill down my spine. This is going to trial? Multiple trials, most likely. Corporate espionage, violations of federal cybersecurity regulations, possibly treason charges depending on what we uncover. Your testimony will be crucial to establishing the timeline and the scope of the conspiracy. I thought about Ethan's face when he'd dismissed my findings, about Mallory's immediate rejection of my report. They hadn't just been covering up a security breach, they'd been protecting an espionage operation. I'll do whatever you need. Agent Morrison smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Thank you. We'll need you to sign some confidentiality agreements and undergo a background check for temporary security clearance. The investigation will take months, possibly years. Are you prepared for that kind of commitment? I've been preparing for it my whole career. Over the next 4 hours, I walked them through every detail of my discovery. The ghost IP, the backdoor code, the pattern of data extraction. I explained how the Stratus X module had been integrated into our most sensitive systems, how it had been granted access to classified information, and how it had been used to systematically compromise our government contracts. Agent Morrison took extensive notes, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details. Rebecca Langley focused on the corporate response, trying to understand how the decision-making process had been compromised. As the afternoon wore on, the scope of the investigation became clear. This wasn't just about Orion Systems or Meridian Solutions. It was about a coordinated campaign to infiltrate American cybersecurity infrastructure, using compromised employees and vendors to gain access to classified information. How many other companies are involved? I asked. We're still determining that. But based on the evidence you've provided, we believe this operation has been active for at least 3 years. The potential damage is significant. As I left the Federal Plaza that evening, I felt a mixture of vindication and dread. I'd been right about the security breach, but the implications were far worse than I'd imagined. I wasn't just a whistleblower, I was a key witness in a case that could reshape American cybersecurity policy. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about Orion. Hope you're okay. Former colleague. I frowned. What news? I pulled up a news website and searched for Orion Systems. The results made my heart race. Federal investigation launched into defense contractor cybersecurity breach. Orion Systems under FBI investigation for alleged espionage. Major security breach discovered at government technology vendor. The story was everywhere. Within hours of my meeting with the FBI, the investigation had become public. The articles were carefully worded, avoiding specific details, but the message was clear. Orion Systems was under federal investigation for a major security breach. I scrolled through the comments, watching as former colleagues and industry professionals weighed in on the news. Some defended the company, others speculated about the scope of the breach. A few comments mentioned my name, identifying me as a former employee who had been let go shortly before the investigation was announced. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca Langley's number. Hannah, I wanted to give you a heads up. The story broke earlier than we expected. We're not sure how the information leaked, but the investigation is now public. I saw the news. Are you okay? Is the board okay? We're managing. The stock price has tanked, obviously, and we're dealing with some difficult conversations with our clients. But the board is supportive of the investigation. We want to get to the bottom of this as much as you do. What about Mallory and Price? Are they still with the company? They've been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. We've also brought in an independent cybersecurity firm to conduct a complete audit of our systems. I felt a grim satisfaction. Justice was slow, but it was coming. Hannah, there's something else. We've been getting calls from other companies in the industry. It seems like your discovery has prompted others to look more closely at their own security systems. We might be looking at a much larger investigation. That's good, isn't it? If other companies are compromised, we need to find out. It's good for national security. It's less good for industry stability. We're looking at potential widespread panic about third-party security vendors. After the call ended, I sat in my apartment, watching the news coverage on my laptop. The story was evolving in real time, with new details emerging every hour. Industry analysts were speculating about the scope of the breach. Government officials were calling for enhanced cybersecurity oversight, and stock prices for technology companies were in free fall. I'd spent my career working in the shadows, protecting digital infrastructure that most people never thought about. Now, suddenly, cybersecurity was front-page news. My phone buzzed with another text message. "This is Agent Morrison. Media attention is intensifying. We may need to move up our timeline. Are you available for another meeting tomorrow?" I typed back, "Yes. What's the urgency?" "We have reason to believe that other compromised systems are being activated. Your discovery may have triggered a broader response from the espionage network." I stared at the message, feeling a chill run down my spine. If other compromised systems were being activated, it meant that the people behind this operation knew they'd been discovered and were trying to extract as much information as possible before they were shut down. I was no longer just a witness to a security breach. I was potentially the catalyst for a cyber war. The next morning, I met with Agent Morrison and his team at a different location, a secure facility outside the city. The atmosphere was noticeably more tense than our previous meeting. "Hannah, the situation has escalated. Since your discovery became public, we've detected increased activity from the compromised systems. It appears that the espionage network is accelerating their operations. How bad is it?" "We're tracking unauthorized access attempts at 17 different companies. Most are defense contractors, but some are financial institutions and critical infrastructure providers. The pattern is consistent with your findings at Orion Systems." Agent Morrison pulled up a map on the conference room's display screen. Red dots marked the locations of compromised systems across the country. Each of these represents a potential security breach. We're working with the companies to investigate, but the process is complicated by the fact that some of them may have compromised employees, just like Orion Systems. "What do you need from me?" "We need you to help us develop a profile of the attack methodology. Your technical analysis of the Stratus X module is the most detailed documentation we have of how these systems are compromised. We want to use that information to identify similar vulnerabilities in other systems." Over the next 6 hours, I worked with a team of federal cybersecurity experts to analyze the attack patterns. We mapped the network infrastructure, identified the command and control servers, and documented the data extraction methods. The sophistication of the operation was staggering. This wasn't the work of amateur hackers or opportunistic criminals. This was a state-sponsored espionage program with significant resources and technical expertise. The scary part, one of the FBI analysts told me, is how patient they were. Some of these backdoors have been in place for years, just waiting for the right moment to be activated. Why activate them now? Why not just keep extracting data quietly? Because you found them. Once you documented the backdoor in Stratus X, they knew it was only a matter of time before the entire network was discovered. They're trying to get as much information as possible before we shut them down. As the day wore on, I began to understand the full scope of what I'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about Orion Systems, or even about cybersecurity. This was about economic espionage, political intelligence, and the vulnerability of American infrastructure to foreign influence. "Hannah," Agent Morrison said as we wrapped up the session, "I want you to know that your discovery has probably prevented a much larger catastrophe. If this network had remained hidden for another year or two, the damage could have been irreversible. What happens now? Now we shut them down. All of them. It's going to be a coordinated operation involving multiple agencies and dozens of companies, and you're going to be a key part of that operation." I drove home that evening with a mixture of pride and apprehension. I'd done the right thing. But the consequences were spiraling far beyond anything I'd imagined. The news coverage was intensifying, with congressional hearings being called and international diplomatic tensions rising. My phone had been ringing all day with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and family members who'd seen my name in the news. I'd ignored most of them, but there was one call I couldn't avoid. "Hannah, it's Dad. I saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dad. It's been a crazy few days, but I'm fine." "The news is saying you uncovered some kind of espionage ring. Is that true?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I found a security breach at my former company. The FBI is investigating the scope of the problem. Are you in danger? Do you need to come stay with us for a while?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the technical aspects of the investigation that I hadn't really considered the personal risks. "I don't think so. The FBI is taking precautions. Your mother is worried sick. She's been watching the news all day, convinced that you're going to be targeted by foreign agents or something." I almost laughed. But then I realized that my mother's concerns might not be entirely unfounded. If I was a key witness in a major espionage investigation, there might be people who wanted to silence me. "I'll be careful, Dad, I promise." After I hung up, I double-checked the locks on my apartment door and closed the curtains. For the first time since this all began, I felt truly afraid. My laptop chimed with an email notification. The sender was listed as concerned citizen, but the message made my blood run cold. "You've caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people. Some of those people don't like trouble. Watch your back." I immediately forwarded the email to Agent Morrison and called the number he'd given me for emergencies. "Agent Morrison, this is Hannah. I just received what might be a threat. We'll have someone at your location within 15 minutes. Don't leave your apartment until we arrive." 20 minutes later, 2 FBI agents were in my living room, examining my laptop and asking detailed questions about my daily routines. They checked my apartment for surveillance devices, reviewed my building's security system, and interviewed my neighbors. "We're going to recommend that you stay in a secure location for the next few days," one of the agents told me, "at least until we can determine if this threat is credible." "A secure location? Like witness protection?" "More like a safe house. Temporary protection until the immediate threat level decreases." I packed a bag with enough clothes for a week, unsure when I'd be able to return to my apartment. As I locked my door behind me, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed in less than a week. I'd gone from being a corporate security architect to being a federal witness under protection. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a suburb I didn't recognize. 2 agents stayed with me around the clock, monitoring communications and maintaining contact with the investigation team. I spent my days reviewing technical documents and preparing for testimony, while news of the investigation dominated the headlines. Massive cybersecurity breach affects dozens of companies. Federal investigation expands to include foreign espionage charges. Whistleblowers' discovery triggers international cyber crisis. Each day brought new revelations about the scope of the espionage network. Companies I'd never heard of were being raided by federal agents. Executives were being arrested. The stock market was in turmoil as investors tried to assess which companies might be compromised. On the 4th day, Agent Morrison visited the safe house with an update. "We've made significant progress. The coordinated operation yesterday resulted in the seizure of 17 server farms and the arrest of 43 individuals. The network has been effectively dismantled." "What about the people who were threatening me?" "We believe they were associated with the espionage ring. With the network shut down, the threat level has decreased significantly. You should be able to return to your normal life within a few days." "Normal life? I don't think anything about my life is going to be normal after this." Agent Morrison smiled grimly. "You're probably right. But you've done something important. Hannah, you've helped protect national security and exposed a serious threat to American infrastructure. What happens to Orion Systems?" "That depends on the extent of the corporate leadership's involvement. If it was just Mallory and Price, the company might survive with new management. If the corruption goes deeper, they could be looking at criminal charges and potential dissolution." And Rebecca Langley? She's been cooperative throughout the investigation. The board appears to have been kept in the dark about the security compromises. They'll likely face regulatory scrutiny and civil lawsuits, but criminal charges are unlikely for the board members who weren't directly involved. I nodded, processing the information. When do I go back to my apartment? Tomorrow morning. We'll maintain periodic check-ins for the next month, but you should be safe to resume your normal activities. That evening, I sat alone in the safe house, watching the sunset through bulletproof windows. The past week had been a whirlwind of federal agents, classified briefings, and international espionage. Tomorrow, I would return to my apartment and try to figure out what came next. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Job opportunity. Interested in discussing? Department of Homeland Security. I stared at the message, realizing that my old life as a corporate security architect was probably over. The industry would remember me as the whistleblower who'd exposed a massive espionage ring. Some companies would see me as a hero, others would see me as a liability. But the government apparently saw me as an asset. I typed back, interested. When can we talk? The response came immediately. How about Monday? We have a lot to discuss. The next morning, I returned to my apartment to find a stack of mail and 17 missed calls on my home phone. Most of the calls were from reporters, but a few were from former colleagues and industry contacts. One message stood out from the rest. Hannah, this is Dr. Patricia Wells from MIT. I run the cybersecurity program here. I've been following your work on the Orion Systems case, and I'd like to discuss a potential teaching position. We need someone with real-world experience to help train the next generation of security professionals. Please call me when you get a chance. I saved the message and smiled. Teaching might be exactly what I needed, a chance to share what I'd learned without the corporate politics and moral compromises that had defined my career up to this point. My laptop chimed with an email notification. The sender was Rebecca Langley. Hannah, I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for your courage and integrity. The board has voted to offer you a substantial settlement for your wrongful termination, along with a formal apology. More importantly, we've implemented new cybersecurity protocols based on your recommendations. I know we can never undo the way you were treated, but I hope you'll consider this a small step toward making things right. If you're ever interested in returning to the private sector, Orion Systems would be honored to have you back, assuming we survive the current crisis. I closed the email without responding. The settlement offer was generous, probably enough to cover my expenses for several years. But money wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to know that what I'd been through had made a difference. That afternoon, I walked to the nearest coffee shop and bought a newspaper. The front page featured a large photograph of Richard Mallory being led away in handcuffs, with the headline, Defense Contractor CEO Arrested in Espionage Case. I read the article while sipping my coffee, learning details about the investigation that hadn't been shared with me. Mallory had allegedly received over $2 million in payments from foreign entities over a 3-year period. Ethan Price had been arrested as well, though his involvement appeared to be less extensive. The article mentioned me by name as the cybersecurity professional whose discovery of a backdoor in company systems led to the broader investigation. It described me as a 12-year veteran of the industry with a reputation for technical excellence and attention to detail. I folded the newspaper and walked home, feeling a strange sense of closure. The story was out there now. Public record, part of history. I'd been vindicated, but more importantly, the threat had been neutralized. Monday morning, I met with representatives from the Department of Homeland Security at their offices in downtown Chicago. The building was imposing, all concrete and steel, with security measures that made my former corporate office look like a coffee shop. Ms. Whitaker, the senior official began. Your work on the Orion Systems case was exceptional. You demonstrated exactly the kind of technical expertise and ethical integrity that we need in the cybersecurity field. Thank you. We'd like to offer you a position as a senior cybersecurity analyst with our Critical Infrastructure Protection Division. The role would involve working with private companies to identify and mitigate security vulnerabilities, particularly those related to foreign espionage. I listened as they outlined the position: competitive salary, federal benefits, the opportunity to work on cases with national security implications. It was everything I'd thought I wanted when I first got into cybersecurity. Can I have some time to consider the offer? Of course, take as long as you need. But I should mention that we're hoping to have you start as soon as possible. The Orion Systems case has revealed vulnerabilities in dozens of other companies. We need experienced professionals to help address the scope of the problem. That evening, I called Dr. Mites Wells at MIT. Hannah, I'm so glad you called. I've been hoping we could discuss the teaching position. I'm definitely interested. Can you tell me more about what would be involved? We're looking for someone to teach our graduate-level cybersecurity courses and to help develop new curriculum based on real-world threat scenarios. Your experience with the Orion Systems case would be invaluable in helping students understand how security breaches actually happen in corporate environments. That sounds fascinating. The position would also involve some research opportunities. We're particularly interested in developing better methods for detecting insider threats and compromised vendor relationships. Your expertise in those areas would be crucial. I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Teaching and research sounded infinitely more appealing than continuing to fight the same battles in different corporate environments. When would you need an answer? No rush. Why don't you come visit campus next week? Meet the faculty, see the facilities, get a feel for the environment. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment weighing my options. The DHS position would put me at the center of national cybersecurity policy, with the resources and authority to make a real difference. The MIT position would allow me to shape the next generation of security professionals, potentially preventing future incidents like the one I'd uncovered. Both options represented a dramatic departure from my corporate career. Both would allow me to use my experience to serve a larger purpose. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Federal investigation expands to include 23 additional companies. I opened the article and saw that the investigation I'd triggered was continuing to expand. The espionage network had been larger and more sophisticated than anyone had initially realized. Companies across multiple industries were discovering that their systems had been compromised. At the bottom of the article, there was a quote from a federal official. This investigation demonstrates the critical importance of cybersecurity professionals who are willing to speak up when they identify threats. The individual who first reported this breach has potentially saved American companies and government agencies from years of additional espionage. I set my phone aside and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in those buildings were other security professionals, working late nights and drinking cold coffee, protecting digital infrastructure that most people took for granted. Some of them might be facing the same choice I'd faced: whether to report a security threat that their employers didn't want to acknowledge, whether to risk their careers for the sake of doing what was right. I hoped that when they faced that choice, they would remember my story. I hoped they would choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience. My laptop chimed with an email from Agent Morrison. Final report on the Orion Systems investigation attached. Thought you'd want to see the full scope of what you uncovered. I opened the attachment and began reading. The report was 127 pages long, detailing an espionage network that had infiltrated 41 companies, extracted classified information from 16 government contracts, and compromised the cybersecurity infrastructure of 3 allied nations. The network had been operating for over 4 years, growing more sophisticated and more dangerous with each passing month. If I hadn't discovered that ghost IP, if I hadn't documented the back door, if I hadn't refused to stay silent when my employers tried to suppress my findings, the damage could have continued indefinitely. The report estimated that my discovery had prevented the theft of classified information worth billions of dollars and had protected national security secrets that could have compromised ongoing military and intelligence operations. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I would make my decision about the future. Tonight, I would allow myself to feel proud of what I'd accomplished. The phone rang. It was my father. Hannah, your mother and I have been talking. We want you to know how proud we are of you. Thanks, Dad. When you were a kid, you always had this sense of right and wrong. You never hesitated to speak up when something wasn't fair, even when it got you in trouble. I'm glad you never lost that. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier to just keep quiet. Easier, maybe, but not right. You did the right thing, Hannah. You should be proud of that. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, thinking about the choices that had brought me to this moment a week ago. I'd been a corporate employee, following procedures and trying to advance my career. Tonight, I was a key witness in a federal investigation, with job offers from prestigious institutions and a story that would be told in cybersecurity textbooks for years to come. It hadn't been an easy journey. I'd lost my job, been threatened by foreign agents, and spent days in a federal safe house. But I'd also helped protect national security and prevented a catastrophic breach of classified information. My phone buzzed with one final message of the day, this time from Rebecca Langley. Orion Systems Board meeting tomorrow. Voting on new security protocols based on your recommendations. Your work is going to make us a better company. I smiled and set the phone aside. Whatever I decided about my future, I knew that my discovery would continue to have an impact. Companies would implement better security protocols. Government agencies would enhance their oversight of contractor relationships. And cybersecurity professionals would be more vigilant about potential threats. The ghost IP that had appeared at 2:58 a.m. on a Tuesday night had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape American cybersecurity policy. One unauthorized connection. One backdoor hidden in seemingly legitimate code. One security professional willing to ask difficult questions. Sometimes the most important moments begin with the smallest details. I walked to my bedroom and set my alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow, I would make the most important career decision of my life. Tonight, I would sleep better than I had in weeks, knowing that I'd done everything right. The last thing I saw before closing my eyes was my laptop screen, still displaying Agent Morrison's final report. At the top of the document, in bold letters, was a quote that would stay with me forever. The security of our nation's digital infrastructure depends on professionals who prioritize truth over comfort, who choose courage over compliance, and who understand that silence in the face of wrongdoing is not neutrality. It is complicity. I turned off the light and let sleep take me, secure in the knowledge that when I'd faced that choice, I'd chosen correctly.